This is SpaceTime, Series 29, Episode 11, for broadcast on the 26th of January 2026. Coming up on SpaceTime, planet Earth hit by another record-setting solar storm, the Artemis 2 mission ready to send astronauts back to the moon for the first time in more than 50 years, and finally proof that an asteroid really did slam into the North Sea more than 43 million years ago. All that and more coming up on SpaceTime.
Welcome to SpaceTime with Stuart Gary.
Planet Earth's just been hit by another massive geomagnetic solar storm. The event was triggered by a powerful X-1.9 class solar flare, followed by a coronal mass ejection, which pummeled the planet, generating spectacular auroral activity. Charged particles slammed into Earth's magnetic field, producing the northern and southern lights, the aurora borealis and aurora australis. In fact, the aurora australis was seen as far north as Sydney and Brisbane. Solar flares are ranked on a logarithmic scale in ascending strength, with each letter representing a 10-fold increase in intensity, listed as A, B, C, M and X, which are the most powerful. The letters are then followed by a number to further refine the storm's intensity. This latest solar flare was generated by a sunspot region known as AR 4341. The event comes as the Sun begins its descent from solar maximum, the climax of its 11-year solar cycle. While solar flares and coronal mass ejections usually reach their most intense at solar max, they can continue to be very active during the early parts of the waning period. The current solar cycle, 25, began back in November 2019, and it won't end until solar minimum sometime around 2030, at which point the Sun's magnetic poles will flip polarity, North Pole becoming south and South Pole north. The X-1.9 class solar flare and the following coronal mass ejection were observed by the LASCO chronographs aboard the joint European Space Agency NASA SOHO spacecraft, which monitors the Sun from the Lagrangian L1 position, a sort of gravitational point of equilibrium where the pull of the Earth and Sun balance each other out, thereby allowing a spacecraft to remain there without expending much fuel. The observations by the European Space Agency show the coronal mass ejection hit Earth at some 1,700 kilometres per second, around 25 hours after blasting out from the Sun. High-energy particles in Earth's vicinity crossed the alarm thresholds, showering the Sun-facing side of the planet, which was over the Americas. The high-energy particle shower peaked in intensity on January the 19th, reaching severe S4 levels. That makes it one of the most intense solar storms since the October 2003 Halloween storm, and it places it at the top of the list of the most intense radiation storms in the GOES spacecraft records. That Halloween space weather event back in 2003 resulted in power blackouts in Sweden and damages to power transformers across southern Africa. See, when a solar flare erupts, the explosion can release as much energy as 1 billion nuclear bombs. A torrent of electromagnetic waves leaves the Sun, travelling at the speed of light, arriving at Earth some 8 minutes later, potentially disrupting shortwave radio transmissions and causing errors in navigation systems. Following on, a fraction of an hour behind, are high-speed solar particles, including protons, electrons and alpha particles. This radiation can harm astronauts in space. It can also damage spacecraft, short-circuiting electrical systems. It can black out communications and navigation systems and produce a cascade of secondary particles in Earth's atmosphere that can cause errors with electronic components if they reach the ground. A solar flare is often accompanied by a large eruption of ionized gas from the Sun's outer atmosphere. This is the coronal mass ejection, or CME. These create gusts of shock waves in the solar wind, the continuous stream of charged particles flowing out from the Sun. These can take anything from 18 hours to a few days to reach our planet. When a CME arrives at Earth, it stresses the planet's magnetic field, causing what's known as a geomagnetic storm. This can make compass needles wander, and it can provoke damaging surges of electrical currents in long metallic structures, such as power cables and pipelines. Now, also during geomagnetic storms, particles from space travel along the planet's magnetic field lines into the upper atmosphere. There, they collide with atoms and molecules, creating spectacular auroral light displays. But the currents injected into the atmosphere not only produce wonderful light shows, they also heat the Earth's upper atmosphere, making it swell and expand. And that can increase atmospheric drag on satellites in low Earth orbit. A satellite then needs to compensate for that drag using thrusters to regain an operational orbit. Otherwise, its orbit will further decay, ultimately causing the satellite to break up in Earth's atmosphere. This is space-time. Still to come, Artemis 2 ready to send astronauts back to the moon for the first time in more than 50 years, and proof that an asteroid did slam into the North Sea some 43 million years ago. All that and more still to come on Space-Time. This episode of Space-Time is brought to you by Squarespace, the platform that makes building an incredible online presence not just possible, but effortless. Squarespace gives you all the tools you need to create a professional website, claim your perfect domain, promote your brand, and even get paid, all in one easy-to-use place. Whether you're showing off your portfolio, selling products, or booking clients, Squarespace has you covered. If you're in the business of offering services, whether it's one-on-one consulting, workshops, or unique experiences, Squarespace streamlines everything from presentation right through to payment. You can design a site that beautifully showcases what you do best, send sleek on-brand invoices, and accept online payments with ease. Clients can even book time directly through your site using Squarespace's built-in scheduling tools. Plus, automation features like email campaigns help you keep your audience engaged without spending hours on administration. And here's where it gets really exciting. Squarespace's design tools give everyone the power to create a website that looks like it came from a top-tier design studio. Now, if you want to see how easy it is to bring your ideas to life online, visit squarespace.com/spacetime for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, use the code SPACETIME at the checkout to save 10% on your first purchase for a website or domain. That's squarespace.com/spacetime, promo code SPACETIME, and of course we have a link in our show notes.
This is SpaceTime with Stuart Gary.
NASA's giant Artemis 2 moon rocket has finally rolled out onto the launch pad for next month's planned mission to send astronauts back to the moon for the first time in more than half a century. It was 1972 when the crew of Apollo 17 walked on the lunar surface, the last time humans visited the magnificent desolation of this alien world. Now, Artemis 2 won't land on the moon. That'll have to wait for the Artemis 3 mission, slated for later next year or possibly 2028, depending on how quickly SpaceX get their Starship Super Heavy operational. But the crew of Artemis 2 will orbit the moon, in the process travelling further from Earth than humans have ever journeyed before. The 98-metre-tall SLS Space Launch System rocket rolled out from NASA's giant vehicle assembly building at dawn, mounted on top of its crawler transporter. Now that's the same building and one of the same crawler transporters that carried the mighty Saturn V moon rockets half a century earlier during the Apollo manned moon program and later for the Space Shuttle program. The crawler slowly creeped along the 6-kilometre-long roadway, Space Launch Complex 39B, travelling at just 1.6 kilometres per hour. And thousands of Kennedy Space Center workers and their families were gathered to witness the long-awaited event. The flight will be only the second launch of the SLS rocket. The first was back in November 2022 when it sent an unmanned Orion capsule on an orbit around the moon. But concerns about the heat shield and other technical issues with the Orion spacecraft on that first flight forced scientists and engineers to carry out extensive reanalyses and additional testing before approval was given for this historic first manned mission. The 10-day flight will evaluate the spacecraft systems, practice docking procedures, test a radiation shelter, undertake several deep space science experiments, deploy a number of satellites, and make new observations of the moon from a closer vantage point than what human eyes have had in more than 50 years. But it doesn't end there. The Artemis 2 crew will travel over 7,400 kilometres beyond the lunar far side before swinging back around and returning to Earth, splashing down in the Pacific Ocean. That'll make this mission the furthest humans have ever travelled from the Earth. This report from NASA TV.
NASA's Artemis II is the first crewed lunar mission in over 50 years. 4 astronauts will venture around the moon, preparing humanity for a long-term lunar presence for scientific discovery and exploration. The 10-day test flight will demonstrate a range of deep space exploration capabilities with crew. The mission will prove the Orion spacecraft is ready to keep astronauts alive in deep space and allow the crew and ground teams to practice operations essential to the success of future missions. On launch day, the Artemis II crew suits up, undergoes final checks, and rides in the crew transportation vehicles to Launch Pad 39B at NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida. Stacked on the mobile launcher, NASA's 322-foot-tall SLS, or Space Launch System rocket with the Orion spacecraft awaits the crew, having made its 4-mile journey from the vehicle assembly building on the crawler transporter to the pad. The launch team fills the SLS propellant tanks with over 700,000 gallons of liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen and verifies guidance, communications, and avionics. At 12 seconds before liftoff, the hydrogen burn-off igniters fire. About 6 seconds later, the rocket's 4 RS-25 engines ignite. When the countdown reaches 0, the umbilicals retract, giving SLS and the crew in Orion the clearance to begin the journey. The 6 million-pound moon rocket produces 8.8 million pounds of thrust to accelerate towards space. 75% of this power comes from the 2 17-story solid rocket boosters, each producing 3.6 million pounds of thrust. About 2 minutes in, the boosters are released, their solid propellant consumed. The core stage and its RS-25 engines continue to propel Orion and the crew to space. After 3 minutes, the protective fairings surrounding Orion's service module are ejected, exposing its solar arrays. 6 seconds later, the launch abort system is ejected from Orion. The crew has safely reached Earth orbit, though they could still abort using service module engines. About 8 minutes after launch, the SLS core stage engines shut down and the interim cryogenic propulsion stage, or ICPS, and Orion separate from the core stage. Orion and the ICPS are now flying free. Orion's 4 solar arrays deploy, powering the spacecraft and charging its batteries for when it moves out of direct sunlight during the journey to the moon and back. After a 90-minute orbit, the engine of the rocket's upper stage, or ICPS, ignites to raise Orion to a high Earth orbit. The Artemis II crew and Mission Control in Houston then begin a nearly 24-hour systems check while the astronauts are still relatively close to Earth, familiarizing themselves with their new home for the next several days. Once in high Earth orbit, Orion separates from the upper stage. The expended ICPS and Orion stage adapter serve as a target for a manual handling test called the Proximity Operations Demonstration, preparing future crews for rendezvous, docking, and undocking with other spacecraft. During the demonstration, Artemis II astronauts use cameras and line of sight through Orion's windows to pilot the spacecraft as they approach and back away, assessing Orion's handling qualities, hardware, and software. Following the demonstration, spacecraft data is collected to verify system performance, such as life support, communications, and navigation, ensuring Orion and the crew are ready for the voyage ahead. About 23 hours later, Orion's service module performs the translunar injection burn, or TLI, pushing Orion out of Earth orbit and on an approximately 4-day trip to the moon. Ultimately, the crew's figure-8 flight path extends more than 230,000 miles from Earth. During the trip, the astronauts continue to evaluate the spacecraft systems and practice emergency procedures like testing the radiation shelter. The Artemis II crew travels about 4,600 miles beyond the moon, becoming the first humans to lay eyes on the lunar far side in over 50 years. Their observations will help us prepare for future missions at the moon. During this period, there will be an anticipated communication blackout between Mission Control and the spacecraft. As the crew returns from the far side of the moon, Orion is drawn home by Earth's gravity in a free return trajectory, ensuring a fuel-efficient 4-day trip. Before entering the atmosphere, Orion's crew module separates from the service module. 12 thrusters ensure Orion is properly oriented at an altitude of about 75 miles from Earth's surface. Orion and the crew enter Earth's atmosphere at a speed of nearly 25,000 miles per hour. Decelerating at a rate up to 4 times the force of gravity, the crew will feel 4 times heavier than they do on Earth. Orion's heat shield protects the spacecraft from temperatures of about 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit, about half as hot as the surface of the Sun. To slow its descent, Orion begins a precise deployment sequence of 11 parachutes. 3 forward bay cover parachutes first separate the protective thermal cover that sits over the chutes. 2 drogues slow and stabilize the crew module, then cut free. 3 pilot chutes lift the 3 main parachutes, deployed at an altitude of 9,000 feet and traveling 130 miles per hour. These chutes slow the crew module to a speed of less than 20 miles per hour. After traveling more than 595,000 nautical miles, Orion splashes down in the Pacific Ocean, about 50 nautical miles from the California coast, just 16 minutes after entering Earth's atmosphere. After splashdown, a recovery team that includes the U.S. Navy, Air Force, and NASA approaches Orion. The team ensures it's safe for the crew to exit before divers help the astronauts onto an inflatable front porch, hoist them into helicopters, and fly to the recovery ship. Orion is towed into the ship for its return to Kennedy Space Center. Their mission complete, the crew is flown back to land and step on solid ground for the first time in 10 days. This is Artemis 2.
This is SpaceTime. Still to come, finally proof that an asteroid did hit the North Sea more than 43 million years ago. And later in the science report, new evidence shows the collision between Central and South America occurred far earlier than previously thought. All that and more still to come on SpaceTime. A decades-long scientific debate over the origins of the Silver Pit crater in the southern North Sea has finally been resolved, following new evidence confirming that it was caused by an asteroid or comet which impacted the Earth somewhere between 43 and 46 million years ago. The findings, reported in the journal Nature Communications, are based on seismic imaging, microscopic analysis of rock samples, and numerical modelling. The study's lead author, Uzdine Nicholson from the Harvard University, says it's the strongest evidence yet that Silver Pit was indeed an impact crater. The Silver Pit crater sits some 700 metres below the seabed in the North Sea, around 130 kilometres off the Yorkshire coast. Ever since its discovery back in 2002, the 3-kilometre wide crater, which is surrounded by a 20-kilometre wide zone of circular fault lines, has been at the centre of a heated debate among geologists. Initial studies suggested that it was an impact crater. The scientists who discovered it pointed to its central peak, its circular shape and concentric fault rings, all characteristics often associated with hypervelocity impacts. However, alternative theories argue that the crater structure was caused by salt moving deep below the crater floor, or possibly due to the collapse of the seabed because of volcanic activity. In 2009, geologists put the crater's formation to the vote and decided against the impact crater hypothesis. But this new evidence has now proved them all wrong. Nicholson and colleagues used newly available seismic imaging data and evidence from below the seabed to finally prove the impact theory. The samples from an oil well in the area also revealed shocked quartz and feldspar crystals at the same depth as the crater floor. That's clear evidence of an impact event. The authors suspect the impact was caused by what they believe was a 160-metre wide asteroid hitting the seabed at a shallow angle from the west. Within seconds, it created a 1.5-kilometre high curtain of rock and water that then collapsed back into the sea, creating a tsunami more than 100 metres high. Nicholson says Silver Pit is a rare and exceptionally well-preserved hypervelocity impact crater. These are rare because the Earth is such a dynamic planet, with plate tectonics and erosion destroying almost all traces of most of these sorts of events. In fact, there are only around 200 confirmed impact craters on land, and only 33 have been identified beneath the ocean. Scientists can use these findings to better understand how asteroid impacts shaped our planet throughout history, as well as predicting what's going to happen the next time we suffer an asteroid collision. The confirmation of Silver Pit as an impact crater places it alongside structures such as the more famous Chicxulub crater in Mexico. That's the one linked to the mass extinction of all the dinosaurs other than birds 66 million years ago. and the Nadir crater off the West African coast, which was only recently also confirmed as an impact site. This is SpaceTime. And time now to take a brief look at some of the other stories making news in science this week with the Science Report. A new study has found no evidence of a link between taking paracetamol during pregnancy and an increased risk of babies developing autism. The findings, reported in the Lancet Medical Journal, counter earlier claims by United States Health and Human Services Secretary Robert Kennedy Jr. that such a link did exist. The new findings are based on 43 previous studies, which were then reanalyzed with data pulled from 17 of them. Crunching the numbers, the authors found there was no link between taking paracetamol during pregnancy and the risk of babies developing autism spectrum disorder, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or any other intellectual disabilities. In fact, the lack of a link held true when researchers selected only the most robust studies, or only those with at least 5 years of follow-up. The World Meteorological Organization has confirmed that 2025 was one of the 3 warmest years on record. The confirmation continues the current streak of extraordinary global temperatures. In fact, the past 11 years have been the 11 warmest years on record for planet Earth. The findings are based on analysis of 8 key data sets, 2 of which rank 2025 as the second warmest year in the 176-year record, while the other 6 ranked it as the third warmest year. A new study claims the main tectonic collision between Central and South America occurred far earlier than previously thought. The findings, reported in the journal Earth and Planetary Physics, provides fresh insights into the timing of what was one of the most important tectonic activities to have shaped the Americas. The authors reached their conclusions after analysing the magnetic properties of volcanic rocks from the northern Andes of Colombia, confirming that the main collisional stages occurred earlier than previously thought, before about 10 million years ago. The researchers focused on the Miocene volcanic rocks, which are approximately 12 to 6 million years old, from the Comba volcanic province located in central Colombia. These rocks were formed during a critical interval when the South American plate was interacting with the continental part of Central America. A survey by All Star Home indicates that 1 in 6 Americans believe supernatural activity is happening in their own homes. Furthermore, 1 out of 5 people in the survey reported they've experienced unexplained or unusual occurrences in their house. Now, a paranormal investigator has come out with a guide for how to live with ghosts. The skeptic's Tim Mendham says the ghost hunter's advice is to treat them with respect. Don't antagonise them. Just talk to them normal. Say things like, I realise you want to be here too.
The issue I always have with ghosts and hauntings is that there's so many of them, cases, examples, that you wonder, surely there must be better evidence somewhere. I mean, what I've found is that there's so many cases all the time. There's not a pub in England which doesn't have a ghost. There's not a museum in America or a theatre that doesn't have a ghost. There's so many cases of hauntings, etc., that there should be better evidence for the existence of ghosts, and there's not. All the evidence is pretty poor. And this is what you're finding, that people are seeing something they can't explain, so therefore they try and explain it with something which is drawn out of a bag somewhere. And it's sad that it happens. 1 in 6 Americans, according to one survey, think that supernatural activity is happening in their home. Whether they're less educated or more educated, the thing you learn in the skeptics is pretty quickly is that it doesn't matter what sort of qualifications people have, including a Nobel Prize, they can still believe silly things, or certainly unwarranted things. There is no reason to believe some of these things, but the culture at the moment, the climate at the moment for believing ghosts is huge.
What sort of advice do paranormal investigators give you on living with ghosts?
Yeah, you have to realise that if you get a paranormal investigator in, they're not going to say, is your house haunted? They're going to say, your house is haunted, and what do we do about it? Now, one of them thinks you bring in an exorcist or a clergyman or something like that to throw some holy water around, and that might get rid of it. But generally, most of them say you've got to live with it. The ghost is sort of probably not going to do you a lot of harm, although ghosts act in different ways and have different corporeal natures and all sorts of things like this. Some saying if you talk to it nicely, don't antagonise them, just talk to them and say, I realise you want to be here too, so that's okay. Or, I'm having a bit of a problem with this. Could you leave, please?
Don't touch my things.
Which is not the way that ghosts are often portrayed in scary films. Ghosts in scary films are out to sort of kill you and take you down to hell. There are various ways that people seem to know that their place is haunted. Things move, doors move in the wind, there's cold spots, etc. Something rattles here or there, there's a squeaky floorboard. Pets might be reacting to a ghost that they see that you can't. There was one in the story I recently read that there was one particular psychic who was recommending, saying you have to use your critical thinking and figure out what else it could be before you jump to, oh, my house has a ghost. But then she says houses are regularly haunted, so she's got a vested interest in making sure the houses are haunted, and therefore we will suggest to you do a bit of consulting practice.
That's the skeptic's Tim Mindham, and this is Space Time. And that's the show for now. SpaceTime is available every Monday, Wednesday and Friday through Bytes.com, SoundCloud, YouTube, your favourite podcast download provider, and from spacetimewithstuartgary.com. SpaceTime's also broadcast through the National Science Foundation on Science Zone Radio and on both iHeartRadio and TuneIn Radio. And you can help to support our show by visiting the SpaceTime store for a range of promotional merchandising goodies, or by becoming a SpaceTime patron, which gives you access to triple-episode commercial-free versions of the show, as well as lots of bonus audio content which doesn't go to air, access to our exclusive Facebook group, and other rewards. Just go to spacetimewithstuartgary.com for full details.
You've been listening to SpaceTime with Stuart Gary. This has been another quality podcast production from Bytes.com.